Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game and the Coastal Sports Network. So glad everybody can be with us this evening. It's crazy. We're almost halfway through this thing, and then what do we get? The Dole
I'm seeing this.
Kevin Midgette. How you doing this evening?
Glad to be back. Glad to be back. There's a lot that's been going on. Like you said, we're about halfway through this little mess right now. Nobody still knows who's good and who's bad, with the exception of maybe like 4 or 5 teams right now. It's anybody is still in the mix for the most part.
Yeah, it's crazy, Kevin. There's a lot in the middle in the National Football League, and in terms of teams, and there's a lot to do. Now we do know who's terrible though, and there's some teams that are just you talk they're at an all-time low. New England Patriots, I had to suffer through watching that game early Sunday morning. I woke up to watch that, and some of these teams are just extremely. They're just not going to get it done. So, but on the field, we're going to go heavy Eagles with Kevin first, so because I didn't get a chance to talk with him after that great fiasco, after Nick Sirianni, a coach who we've talked about, is on a hot seat. He decides after a big win over the Cleveland Browns of all teams, another one of these very bad teams that probably needs to be broken up. He decides, to put his ear to the crowd. I don't hear you. You were booing me earlier. Now you love me, and it was just the wrong time for it. I was on the show with Rich last week, and on his show, and I'd said it was clownish. So first, talk to me about Sirianni, and then we'll talk about where the Eagles are almost at the halfway point.
Sirianni is a clown. I think we've established it at this point. He's not ready for the job. It's exactly what it is. Nobody acts like he acts at a game since his tenure in Philadelphia. He acts like this rah rah high school football coach, and you're supposed to be a leader of men. And what do? You beat one of the worst teams in football, and you start pounding your chest at your own fans. How happy do you think Jeffrey Lurie was about the way he was acting representing his franchise? I mean, it's a joke. This guy, we've talked about it before. He loses his Eagles.
Angel, you got me.
Yeah, yeah, we're good on this end. I am on mine anyway. But the one thing I'll continue while we're figuring this out is the one thing we said about Nick Sirianni is if he lose, not if he lose, when he eventually loses this Eagles job, he will not get another head coaching job in the NFL right away. I don't even think he'll be a coordinator because he's not really dialing up the plays right now. So what he would have to do is probably go to college and try to work his way back. So, and I just don't see anyone jumping at the Nick Sirianni wagon there. If I tell you what, if they would have lost that game to the Giants, he's a lot more quicker out that locker room than anyone else. He's that kind of he's in that fringe zone right now. Whether or not he's going to make it through the rest of the year.
There we go.
We were just following up on Nick Sirianni with if they lose that Giants game, he's probably out the door a little quicker than everyone would have thought. I mean, he can only be a buffoon for so long where they're going to say this is enough.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, you talk about, and we're going to get to other coaches on the hot seat in a minute. He's 38-19 in 57 games. He's made the playoffs every season, but you just, as you're saying, he's not a leader of men. He does not control the room. Uh, the theatrics he's done in the past, and everybody said he was loose cannon. So, big win for the Eagles over the Giants, and everybody's all happy now. They're on a 2-game winning streak, but they beat worst teams in the National Football League. Spot I got to talk about in terms of the Eagles, though. Saquon Barkley was just incredible in his return. 17 rushes, 176 yards, just pounding the rock, long runs, and he also had a TD. So talk about the Eagles and the Giants.
They beat a bad team. You know what they were going to do. Saquon's coming back to the Giants. You knew he was going to get to see the ball all day. The one thing and I'm nitpicking now, the Eagles won the game, everything else, but just looking at this as a standpoint, when the Eagles are up 21-3 and fourth and goal, they decide to go for the tush push at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Why doesn't Sirianni kick that field goal to make it a 3 touchdown game? I mean, sure, yeah, this play works a lot most of the time. That play doesn't work right there. Say the Giants go down, get a touchdown, get a 2 point conversion. All of a sudden, you're in a 10 point game right now with the whole fourth quarter pretty much to play. It was a bad call. It just happened to work in his favor.
Yeah, and the Eagles team, it's their defense and their promise, and that was just the key to everything. The defensive line couldn't block anybody.
And the defense is starting to show up. They're starting to get some pressure on the quarterback. You're seeing Huff sightings now every week, which is nice because we weren't seeing any of that. I just think Devontae Smith was nowhere to be found as
Angel,
well.
Angel, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Kevin's kind of frozen. All right, we're working through our technical difficulties here. We're listening to Lloyd Vance's Insider Football here on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. And as somebody who is a follower of the Eagles, Kevin, what do you think in terms of where they go this season? Is our jobs really on the line? We know that Sirianni is in the last year of his contract, has not received an just
Yeah, most definitely.
join. So it's a situation where I'll answer my own question until Kevin comes back on. I think the Eagles will make it through this season.
While Lloyd starts working once again with our technical difficulties, I will go on to say the one thing that's beneficial for the Philadelphia Eagles this season is you're in a bad division. You're at a point right now where Dallas hasn't won a game at home yet. The Giants aren't that good. And the one thing you could say about Washington that worked in the Eagles' favor is Jaden Daniels got banged up a little bit to try to slow them down. That is the Eagles' best benefit right now is the division in which they play in.
Yeah, and that was Jane Daniels. We talked about that. He's running a lot. He's slight. He's built almost like Michael Vick. He's that slight. And you taking these hits is cumulative, and he hurts the rib. And now that's something that's going to kind of possibly follow Washington for the rest of the season. So when you look at the Eagles, though, at their schedule, it's kind of favorable because let's not forget they're playing the AFC North and the AFC South this season. So uh, they're at Cincinnati. This is going to be a crucial game. The Bengals are 3-4, and I think they can give the Eagles a good game. They kind of hopefully righted the ship after starting 0-3. So they got the Bengals. They have Jacksonville in a game that was just flexed. That's not going to be on Sunday Night Football anymore. At Dallas, Washington, at the Rams, at the Ravens, Carolina, Pittsburgh, at Washington, Dallas, and then they finished with the Giants. So this is a favorable schedule. And I said all along that I thought the Eagles will win the division, but then, can they get it done in a home playoff game? But I mean, you can't look too far ahead because there's so many injuries around the National Football League. Um, just talk to me a little bit about Saquon and the revenge aspects of yesterday. It reminded me of when T.O. came back to play against the Eagles. Everybody was nuts, burning jerseys and all that stuff. And he said, it kind of stuck in his craw that the Giants fans were burning his jersey and gave him a little extra effort in the game. Obviously, with his numbers, he played very well.
Yeah, this game was built for Saquon to dominate right now. I mean, just sit there. And that's the thing. When you're running the ball effectively, keep running the ball. You don't have to sit there and, these creative plays and everything. Pound the ball with that guy. And the coolest thing I thought also was at the end where Sirianni goes up to Barkley sitting on the sideline because I think he was like 13 yards away from his like career high, for rushing yards in a game, and he said, "Let the other guys eat." There's no reason for him to be back in that game. So some guys
Yeah,
are going
he
to
is a
yards.
leader on this team, and he's quickly established himself. Now, and lean on Saquon, lean on A.J. Brown. lean on Smith when he gets back. Obviously, Goddard's banged up, and he only had 14 throws yesterday, and he was able to have a couple rushing touchdowns, and it just kept things efficient. So, everybody thought after 2022 that Jalen Hurts was going to be this dynamic guy, potential MVP, etc. But he may be more of a guy, okay, just protect the football and let everything around you kind of work.
It's a lot of money to pay to a game manager, though. Some of these contracts, that Trevor Lawrence one sticks out to me every time I have to watch Jacksonville play in London for home games. They're back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, and yeah, it's crazy. This is the craziest in the National Football League when you're seeing quarterbacks who I think are kind of average getting the amount of money they are. I think even Tua and some of these other guys, they're getting paid, $50 million. Kyler Murray as well. He's getting paid a lot of money too. And you're like, okay, are they really worth it? But yeah, if he's going to be a game manager, that's just way too much money to pay for him. And the ultimate though is Kevin's favorite guy, Dak Prescott. He's the highest paid player in the National Football League, and that's just like, are you kidding me? So we're talking Eagles. I think Kevin and I both kind of think, okay, we'll give them a little bit more season with the Philadelphia Eagles. Their schedule's kind of favorable, and these things will shake out. In terms of Sirianni, I still think he's kind of fighting for his job. He has not received that extension yet. And then you have Kellen Moore on your staff, the coach, quote unquote, and waiting. So Eagles on a 2-0 hot streak right now, and then they got a big game against the Bengals, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. I'm joined by Kevin Midgette this evening. We're going to kind of jump around topics. Kevin, a big thing now is injuries. I mean, yesterday was just like a train wreck. And then you start wondering, okay, even if they move to 18 games, could some of these guys get through it? Brandon Ayuk for the Niners, ACL, Mekhi Becton for the Eagles, concussion. Tyler Huntley for the Dolphins, who stepped in for Tua. He has a shoulder injury. He's out. And then the biggest one, you could talk about the injuries, but I kind of wanted to get your take on this. Deshaun Watson, a guy who we've all killed and said, go away, etc. And he tears his Achilles, and his own home fans, they boo/cheer as they're carting him off the field. So start with that one. What do you think of that? And then all but these other injuries.
I mean, I'll put it to you this way. I'll throw myself under the bus here. Phillies are in the playoffs. Ryan Howard's up. They're playing the Cardinals. Last game of the series, the Phillies are down 1-0. Ryan Howard hits a little squibbler or whatever like that, drops to the batter's box. And myself, like everyone else at a bar, are yelling, "Oh, get up. Oh, you're not hurt. You're not hurt." What happened? Ruptured his Achilles, was never the same afterwards. So I will give a little leap. Did I feel like a jerk afterwards when I found out? Oh, God, yeah. But the thing is, if you're in the stands and you're just seeing this guy lay on the ground, and what's the first thing that's going to pop through your head? He's faking. He just doesn't want to be out there and everything else. And then when you find out how he actually hurt himself, that's when you got to feel a little remorseful about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of animosity. We all know the backstory with Watson, the problems in Houston, and he settled all those lawsuits, but he's just not the same player. And Cleveland fans, enough was enough, and they were like, okay, we're going to move on without him. And you talk about injuries. I mean, the Niners, a team that we still all were saying, okay, could they get back to the big game? And I just don't think they're going to be able to make it. They're a mash unit at this point. You have, Brandon Ayuk, as I said, and with Christian McCaffrey, a load of other guys on defense like Hargrave that they don't have anymore. I just don't know if they're going to be a top line team and if they're going to be able to make the playoffs. So talk to me about the Niners. What do you think about there?
We spoke about it, I think it was right before the first week before the season started, and I remember saying that this might be the last year for the Niners window. They've had these opportunities with contracts and everything else to keep the band together. This might have been the last year, and it looks like it's not meant to be. I mean, you can't continue to lose your high, leverage, weapons out there and then expect to keep winning. There's only so many Masons and Juwan Jennings you can put out there. You keep losing guys. I mean, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, and Brock Purdy's doing a pretty good job, but he had 3 interceptions yesterday, and he's still kind of limited. I mean, he's a very efficient quarterback. but he's not going to carry them and put a load on the team. Mason's done a nice job stepping in for McCaffrey as well, but he's just not the same player. And you start wondering, can the Niners win that division, and will they make it back to the playoffs? So, in looking at their schedule coming up, uh, they have Dallas. That'll be interesting. They have their bye. Maybe that'll help them get a little injury healthy. And then they're at Tampa Bay, Seattle, at Green Bay, at Buffalo, Chicago, the Rams, at Miami, Detroit, at Arizona. So you got a lot of potential playoff teams in there, and it's just going to be tough for them. And it may be one of those years where Shanahan has to kind of rebuild that roster, him and John Lynch, and kind of go from there. But they've had a ton of injuries, and we'll see how that goes. Now, Kevin, we also had it was crazy because all along in the National Football League, and you and I are coming on. Coaches didn't want to help each other. They said, "No, we trade on draft day, and that's it." Maybe you get a guy at the end of training camp who's at the back of the roster. But we saw Amari Cooper go from Cleveland to the Buffalo Bills, and then you had Devontae Adams going from the Vegas Raiders to the Jets. So, were you surprised at these trades? Are they going to be a big deal to these teams, or are these guys going to be kind of spare parts?
I think Cooper to Buffalo made sense. That was a good one for Buffalo right there. Just try to upgrade that position just a little bit because we know that they've lost, their bigger receivers in the offseason. The one with the Devontae Adams, it's like, does everyone remember why Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers broke up the first time? It's because Aaron Rodgers took all the money in Green Bay, and for Devontae to get paid, he had to leave and go to the Raiders. So now he's like, nah, come on back now with me in the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is cooked. I don't care what anybody says, washed, cooked, however you want to put it. That guy is done. You can add anybody you want. It's not going to make a difference, I don't think.
Yeah, and Aaron, it was on full display for the National Football League. They're playing on Sunday Night Football, and then all when the Steelers started hitting him, he was you could see he was becoming Aaron Rodgers. They lose 37-15 in this one, and he was looking every bit of 40. He's 24 of 39, 276. He has two interceptions. He did have one TD, kind of forcing the ball to Adams and Wilson in certain spots. And Father Time's undefeated. He's 40. He's going to be 41 soon. And everybody always points to what Tom Brady did with Tampa, but that is an aberration. Quarterbacks at that age, they're pretty much done. And the thing I love about Rodgers and kind of what you were hinting to, he's so quick to do this. It's
Mhm.
everybody else's fault but his. And he's helped put this team together. And he's already gotten the head coach Salah fired. Nathaniel Hackett, his appointed OC, has been demoted. Left is Joe Douglas, maybe the last one, the general manager. He may get rid of him, and then all these guys he's brought with him, his cronies. They just have not worked out. Lazard, yeah, he's had some nice plays here and there, but just something's amiss with this Jets team. And do you think at 2-5 that they can turn this thing around, or they're just cooked? The whole team is as a whole, and Woody Johnson, their owner, is going to have to clean this mess up.
If they don't get hot real quick, they got maybe a week or two window. But then when you get to the back end, I mean, because Tua is supposed to be coming back from Miami now. Which version of Tua we're going to see, we don't know yet. But that made that division a little more difficult now, as opposed to having the list of Miami backups out there. Buffalo seems to have not really missed a beat. I think having lesser wide receivers has made Josh Allen a better quarterback. It seems like he's not forcing it as much as he used to because he's like, I have all these weapons, I can go up and down the field. I mean, I think if they don't do anything in the next week or two, it's time to put a tag on the toe.
Yeah, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, he's playing at a very high level now. They're 5-2, and you talk about an MVP candidate. I was talking about this with Nate. We know Nate's a homer for the Bills, but he's had 15 total touchdowns and no interceptions. So that was always his problem, was the interceptions and the turnovers, and he's just playing efficiently. Now you talk about he's getting Amari Cooper, and he's getting a rushing attack from Davis as well as Cook there. So there's a lot of weapons for the Bills. And I'm not ready to say it's their season, but they're totally running away with that AFC East division. And the Jets are not – they are not a threat to them right now. They're probably going to get right this week. They're at New England. Then they have Houston in a huge game. That's on Thursday night football at Arizona. Colts, they have their bye. Then they have Seattle at Miami, at Jacksonville, the Rams, Buffalo, and then Miami. So a mix of games in there, but a lot of divisional games. And you wonder, are they going to be able to go toe to toe with the Bills? And if the Dolphins have Tua, they're a very formal team in terms of putting up points. And I know they've missed him a lot the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I would tend to think, like you were saying, the Jets are kind of cooked. Rodgers, he's in the last year of his contract. They'll probably move on from him, move on from all his guys he's brought in, and then they'll find another quarterback. It was crazy because on social media I saw a post, and it's like Zach Wilson had 7 interceptions at this time of the season in 2022, 2023, and that's what Aaron Rodgers has. He has 7 interceptions, just not looking like the same guy. And you're starting to wonder, okay, where do they go from here in New York? And we already talked about the Giants and how bad they are. The Giants played terrible in that one. I guess New Yorkers are focusing on the Yankees because football is kind of dead there. And when you talk about the Giants, let's jump back to them real quick. That offensive line was just, I mean, it was Swiss cheese. Yes, for Eagles fans, they were happy. Eagles get 8 sacks, including 2 by Jalen Carter. You had N'Kobe Dean had 2. You had Bryce Huff finally hit the stat column. Sweat gets a stack. So do we think that was more attributed to the Eagles defense getting better, or are the Giants just such a joke?
I combination of both possibly. I mean, I think they feasted off a bottom feeder offensive line speaking, and they got. But then again, it's like getting in the batting cage and getting some good rips. I mean, now they have the feeling, oh, they're busting through, getting the sack. So I mean, it's definitely a confidence builder for that defensive line.
Yeah, and Fangio, once he gets his fastballs going, and he get that pressure, it seems to kind of everybody feeds off of it. So that could be that type of win for the Eagles. I know when I did backer play with Rich, he was saying, Lloyd, I think this could be a get right game for the Eagles and help them. And I kind of was like, well, it's a divisional game. I was a little leery because I've seen so many games against the Giants in my lifetime of watching the Eagles, where they look past them, and next thing you know, Tommy DeVito's beating them. So it was a good win for them, and they'll keep going from there. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We are wrapping a bow on week 7 around the National Football League. There's 2 games going right now. Well, actually, one's going to the Baltimore Ravens against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And in that one, I picked the Ravens. Lamar just seems to dominate against NFC teams. He's 22-1 at this point against NFC teams. What do you think about that Ravens Tampa Bay game that's underway?
I think it's going to let us know where Tampa Bay really is at right now because they've been kind of a surprise of the league in the NFC, I should say, this year. The way they've been scoring points and everything else. So to see how they play against the Ravens, especially with the Ravens' rush defense, to see if they can actually, get some guys some yards there, it's going to be interesting to see. I think Baltimore. I think we spoke about it before. Is the fact is Baltimore is never judged by their regular season. I mean, you got guys won a couple MVPs. You know they're going to win games. It's what they do in the postseason that's going to define this Ravens team.
Yeah, and I guess they're so good. That's what it's come to. But I think we'll see. We'll see because the Chiefs are looking vulnerable. We'll talk about them in a minute. But the Ravens, their calling card's always been their defense, and their defense has not played that well this year. They've letting up a lot of yards, getting in shootout type of games. Yes, they've won a lot of them. They've won 4 straight games. But the key to that team, we know, is Derrick Henry running downhill. He's just playing at an MVP type level. And then Lamar, he's just taking better for him. So, you know, yeah, the Ravens, they seem to be pushing forward, and it's a key game for them tonight. The second game, they're another team. Something's amiss. I'm not saying that Gannon should be on the hot seat or anything. I just feel like the Chargers will win this one because the Cardinals just they're an incomplete team, especially on defense. Allowing a lot of yards. Kyler Murray's he's making a lot of plays.
And one thing we'll say is Lloyd's working on his side right now is that the Cardinals versus the Chargers with Harbaugh, actually, they've kind of redefined themselves. Harbaugh's done a lot quicker than I thought he was going to. There's still a lot of pieces he needs to add as well, but he's made them a competitive team this year, a little better than I thought they were going to be at this point.
Yeah, they have. They have. And it was crazy because the game they started last week, Harbaugh had to be taken into tent. I was like, oh, what's going on with him? The coach just got there. And they were saying they're going to monitor. I don't know if he was having some heart things or something. What was going on there? But he's back on the sidelines. And yeah, that Chargers team, they're becoming a lot like the Ravens West because they're leaning on J.K. Dobbs. He said he'd probably the NFL's comeback player of the year. He's running the ball very effectively. Herbert's not trying to carry the whole show, and they need some more in terms of their receivers. But defensively, they can still get after people with Derwin James and the rest of that unit there. So they have a good offensive line with Rashawn Slater and the guys. So the Chargers are just trying to win ugly, and we'll see how they go from there. I think, yeah, they are going to win that one. We'll keep bouncing around the National Football League here with Kevin Midgette on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. Thanks for being with us. We'll continue looking at the different games. Thursday night football, I feel like I'm like, oh, here we go. We've gotten some stinkers. And this Thursday's game was not. I don't know if the Broncos are that good, but I think the Saints they're done. They've lost 5 straight games. It's crazy because they started NFL record pace, 91 points, 2 games, but they've lost 5 straight games. The Broncos thump them 33-10 in New Orleans. I think, and we talk about our hot seat coaches, Dennis Allen, he may be the next NFL coach fired. So what did you see Thursday night?
Uh, to be honest, I watched a little bit of it. Then it got to the point I kind of moved on with my evening there. Spencer Rattler shouldn't be playing in the NFL at this point in his career. He's not. He doesn't bring anything to the table, and you didn't really think they'd miss Derek Carr as much as they do. But at least Derek Carr was putting points up on the board. I mean, they can't do anything right now. They're just like a turtle on its back.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, it's like the uncle beating up his little nephew. That's the way it is with the Saints. It's just crazy because I just I don't think they're going to make it through this. And the coach, he's been there long enough. He has a body of work. It's just not going to change. So yeah, so that game. The other game, early Sunday morning, I woke up 9 o'clock. I said, all right, I got early football. Jacksonville stayed there 2 weeks. Now, this was the Dougie P game, I'm calling it, because he had to get a win. Because if he didn't win that game, he was going to be like Salah. He was going to be a dead man. They get a solid win over in Wembley Stadium, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this another one. They win 32-16, and you start wondering, okay, we know who one of the worst teams is. That's the New England Patriots. Yeah. Drake May finally decided to play him. He can move around, make some plays, had some nice stuff, but the Patriots are a bad team, and Belichick left the cupboard bare there, and this team is just got bounced around by Jacksonville, who we all know they've had their own struggles. So what did you see there early Sunday morning?
Well, the one thing I will say is I love the games in London. I love getting that early football game. It's like taboo almost. It's like forbidden football. Like I normally shouldn't be getting this, but it's on right now. So I dig that. Dougie P's not even on that flight home. They lose that game. He's finding his own way across the pond back. There is no way if he loses that game to New England, he's keeping that job. So that was a must-win game for him. Jacksonville had better aspirations than what they're showing right now before the season started. They were supposed to be involved in the mix with everything with your big money quarterback and everything else. And they're probably one of the bigger underachieving teams, I should say, this year.
Yeah, that's a good term. Yeah, definitely underachieving in there. their defense is just not stopping anybody, and they had problems when they played better teams. It was good to finally see them get on track. Trevor Lawrence, 15 to 20, 193 yards, one TD, no interception. So he didn't have to do a lot. They were just harassing the Drake May a lot, and the running game was non-existent for the Patriots. And then he had a big return for a touchdown. NFL team record. It was like 90-some punt return, and that kind of broke the game open. So good win for Jacksonville, but I tend to think like you, yeah, it's kind of an aberration, and like, all right, they need to, we'll see if they're able to put some things together, but they definitely are one of the big achieving stories out there. And Peterson is on a hot seat, even though Shad Khan is one of those owners, especially when you have a quarterback and highest paid in the NFL, something like that. So, you know, a lot of expectations, and they haven't lived up to it. This next game I want to talk to you about, Kevin, is I watched a lot of it on Red Zone. The Detroit Lions announced that they may be the best team in the NFC, in my opinion. And I picked them. I picked it was Chiefs against the Lions in the Super Bowl. We'll see if that comes to fruition. Lions go to Minnesota, win 31-29. Kind of a shootout game. They win it in the end, and Bates makes a big kick with like limited time on the clock, and Goff was just so efficient in this one. 22 of 25, 280, two TDs, no interceptions, and then they have one of the most. You talk about Lamar and Derrick Henry. I think the Lions may have the best 1-2 punch in the backfield with Jahmyr Gibbs, who had a great game, and then David Montgomery. Both of them went over 100 yards in this one. So, talk about the Lions. I know a big thing is their defense, and they still are having problems stopping teams, but they've been winning these shootout games, and they're getting a lot of confidence.
Yeah, losing Hutchinson, that was huge for them right there. That was a real kick to the stones. But you're right, the running back combo that they have, the wide receivers that they have as well, and the fact you have to mention, you really haven't heard a lot from Sam Laporta this year after that breakout rookie season as well. I mean, he's still there also. I mean, could you imagine, say, 2 years ago? Oh yeah, we're going to talk about probably the best game of the week. Yeah, it's Sam Darnold against Jared Goff. It's like no way.
Yeah, it's crazy how the NFL world turns, and it's great that for Sam Darnold that he's turned this thing around. I'm still always like, he's going to turn it into old Sam Darnold. Cinderella, he's going to turn it into a pumpkin. Just like he did when he was with the Carolina. Great story for him, and he's going to battle probably J.K. Dobbins for that comeback player of the year in the NFL, and we'll see if the Vikings are able to keep it going. That division, the NFC North, is trying to do something. No one's now have great records, including the Bears, who are 4-2, and they had their bye week this week, and it's going to be interesting to see if this division can keep it going. So he's proving that he's just not some crazy man.
And while we get this going again, the Detroit Lions, like you're saying, with the Minnesota Vikings, Chicago Bears, and Green Bay Packers, in my opinion, it's actually the best division of football right now. You have these young quarterbacks with Jordan Love, you have Caleb Williams, you got the reclaim projects in Jared Goff and Sam Darnold. I think that division, pound for pound, is the best one in football right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And the next game we'll talk about here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Here with Kevin Midgette is Houston went to Green Bay, and this was a statement game because Houston was one of the hottest teams in the league. And Green Bay took them out 24-22. They win it on a last second field goal by Brandon McManus, who was just signed this week by them, a Philly kid from Temple, goes there to Green Bay and made a big kick. And you start looking at Green Bay, they're a dangerous squad as well. And as long as Jordan Love can clean up his turnovers, he had two interceptions to go along with three TDs. This is a team you got to keep your eye on. So What do you think about Green Bay? And there's just so many weapons on his team in terms of receivers, and they even have Kraft kind of breaking out as a tight end. Defense that's very underrated, but Rashawn Gary and Clark and the rest of those guys on his defense, they're playing some good ball. So, what do you think about the Green Bay Packers and that win over the Texans?
I think Jordan Love got a taste of what it's like to win in the postseason last year, and he liked it. And he's not scared of the big moment, it seems, or the big matchup. The one thing he does have weapons. They have four. They run four receivers deep. But I'm just throwing out there for a fantasy purpose. I wouldn't touch a Green Bay Packer wide receiver because it's a different guy every week. It's like I want, but he shares the ball. I mean, that's even harder to scheme against them because you don't know who he's going to go to that day.
Yeah, and the guy that's really had a rebirth there is Josh Jacobs. 12 rushes for 76 yards. He's kind of setting the tone with that offensive line, and Eldon, those guys up front, and then it's making things easier for Jordan Love. And it's crazy, Kevin, because after week one, we're like, oh, he's done for the year. The way they carried him off against the Eagles down there in Brazil, but he's gotten it together, and they have their new D coordinator Heffley, who came over from Boston College. He's done a nice job in terms of fixing that defense. So, Green Bay, another team to be reckoned with in the NFC, and it's going to be fun to see that in Detroit in a couple of weeks and see what teams are going to step forward. So you have Green Bay 5-2. You have Detroit, who's now 5-1 in that division. You have Minnesota 5-1, and then you also have the Bears at 5-2. So they're playing some good ball in that division. The next game will game I saw bits and pieces, and that was enough. The Colts won 16-10 over the Miami Dolphins, and we about the struggles of the Dolphins without Tua. Tua they opened his practice window today, and he's going to probably play in Week 8. Comment on whether he should play, what you think there. Talk about
The one thing I will say also with that Colts Dolphins game, the only way that someone's going to watch that game is if they put it on a Thursday night. No one else wanted to watch that Colts Dolphins game unless you were forced to watch the only game on TV that night. That's how bad
we
of a
lost
matchup
Kevin for a
that was.
minute there. I'm sure he'll be jumping back on it. Second. Did you hear what I was saying about Anthony Richardson struggling in that game?
No, I didn't catch that part.
Yeah, so I wanted you to talk about Tua coming back early. He's coming back next week. They open his practice window. He's supposed to play in Week 8, and then also talk about Anthony Richardson won the game, but he's 10-24 for 129 yards. Are they better off with Joe Flacco?
Absolutely. They're absolutely better off with Joe Flacco. But the thing is, with the high draft pick and the expectations, they want this kid to play. Could they make the playoffs as a wild card with Joe Flacco? There's a possibility, but I don't think unless Richardson gets hurt once again that you're going to really see that happen.
Winning, and they're 4-3, and it's a bad division, and they're going to have their opportunities. But I think the Texans are going to eventually run away with this thing. They're kind of a game ahead of them in the AFC South. And then you have Jacksonville there. You have Tennessee, who's one of those awful teams I was talking about earlier. They're 1-5. So I think Texans win this one, and we'll see how it kind of shakes out in going in this week, because it's going to be a fun week in Week 8. We'll go over the games soon, but there's no buys. So yeah, right on script. You have Indianapolis 4-3 at the Texans. So we're going to find out real quick. Is Richardson for real? How well these Colts can play? That's going to be a tough contest for them. The next game we're going to talk about here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football on 102.9 The Game. Coast Sports Network is. I was surprised by this one, Kevin. It was the Seattle Seahawks. They went to Atlanta and thumped the Falcons 34-14 in this one. Geno Smith, the guy who's resurrected his career, a la Sam Darnold, 18-28, 207 yards, 2 TDs, no interceptions. Kenneth Walker playing very well for them. He had 69 yards rushing. He had I think he had a TD catching the ball and one as well as rushing. So big win for the Seahawks. But what about the Falcons? They're 4-3. Are they for real? Not for real? In that division, it's looking like it's going to be the Falcons, uh, and obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I think Seattle and Atlanta are in the same boat almost. Atlanta, I have rated a little bit ahead of Seattle, even though they lost this game. Seattle's that team. Every time I try to write them off, they come back and get a big win. So it's like they hang around. They're not consistent, and that's what the Falcons also are dealing with right now is consistency and being able to, put back-to-back wins together to beat conference teams that you need for that playoff matchups and seeding.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. They got to get that consistency going, and I think Raheem Moore is there. And when I look at the Falcons and Seattle, as you were saying, they may be fighting it out for that 6, 7 spot, getting into the playoffs, and there will be a wild card team. But they're only a shade ahead of some of these other teams that are a little bit behind them in the standings right now. The next game we'll touch on is Buffalo Bills over the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, we talked about Josh Allen earlier. Bills kill him 34-10. I mean, did you take anything away from this game?
The only thing I took away, it was a little closer than I thought it was going to be earlier until Buffalo pulled away.
Yeah,
I
how about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was like looking, I'm like, really? And then you see the final. It's like, all right, that makes more sense
Yeah.
now.
10
Um,
nothing at the half.
yeah, but I think Tennessee is possibly the worst team in the NFL. I mean, it's debatable, but Tennessee, they are terrible right now, and there's nothing they can do. They need a huge overhaul of everything.
All right, we keep going here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Lose the Battle of Ohio. It was Cleveland over the Browns 21-14 to the Cincinnati Bengals. Now the Bengals are coming back, and Hendrickson and Hubbard, their defensive ends, are starting to get some pressure defensively, and they're still Burrow's getting the ball out of his head. He was 15 of 25 for 181, two TDs, no interceptions, and once Watson got hurt in this one, this game was over, and they had DTR coming, a young quarterback, and he was making some plays, and then they even brought in Jameis. So, but Cleveland was cooked after that injury. What do you see from the Bengals, and they're the Eagles' opponent coming up? Do you think they can keep this same rolling? Or they at they started 0-3.
Yeah, that's pretty much par for the course for the Bengals. They don't really start to cook until after October starts. So that could be a tough matchup for the Eagles on that one right there because they can get after the quarterback a little bit as well. And it's about Jalen making the right decisions in that game, not forcing the ball and throwing interceptions, which he hasn't done lately, but he has in the past. The Cleveland Browns, and one thing I want to say, it was good to see Nick Chubb back. Nick Chubb got back out there. He got a touchdown. He went through a big ordeal and process to get back on the field, so that was nice to see.
Yeah, and the great thing about Nick Chubb is, I know a lot of fantasy owners had him on their bench, and they were like, "All right, come on, let's unleash him," and it was good to see him out there. He looked healthy. I saw him take some hits, and their offensive line's kind of downtrodden, so he had to make some of his new. And this season just going to get longer for the Browns. They're 1-6. All right, we'll go over a couple more games here. This is another one. It's like, ooh, you had the Raiders, who are another one of these really bad teams. The Raiders lose 20-15 to the Rams. You had a 2-5 team losing a 2-4 team. Could we take anything from this? Yeah, Stafford was okay in this one, but the Raiders are terrible. So anything else we can take from this game?
The only thing we can take out of it is O'Connell's done for a while, so we get Gardner Minshew back. Minshew mania starts again with the Raiders. That's the only thing I can get out of this game.
Yeah, and O'Connell, he breaks his thumb. They really don't have any receivers. They have Tucker, who's kind of running out there. hurt, and it's just like wow, the Raiders are they've fallen mightily, and you know the NFL trade deadline's coming up on November 5th, and you start wondering, okay, is this going to be like baseball where teams start dumping, you know, and they're like, all right, hold on to people and they deactivate them, and they'd rather have them on their bench rather than send them to a contender.
Yeah, you got a spite situation there as well. I think in today's game, though, guys are more open to cutting bait with some of these guys. Before they would have the NFL trade deadline, and you might see one trade or something like that. Now you got guys already starting to move people, so it's becoming more active. And the patience level, because people know that they're basically one season away from getting fired, is like we need to do something right now to win this season. So there's a little more urgency, I think, on their part as well.
Yeah, trade deadline situation where yeah, I think it's just you have some of these younger GMs that yeah they want to make trades, and the old crotchety guys that the old you know GMs, the Ron Wolfs of the world, and some of those older guys, they were like, all right, we're not trading, but it is good to see some trades, and I think as you talked about earlier, Cooper will make an impact for the Buffalo Bills, Adams and the Jets. Okay, maybe they put up some stats and some things with Aaron Rodgers. The difference is going to make. One of the last games we'll talk about here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football. This was supposed to be the marquee game. The Kansas City Chiefs, now the NFL's only undefeated team, they go to San Francisco and they win 28-18. Niners, and I wouldn't say it was a butt whipping, and it did they just finding ways to and I'll go back to my boxing reference.
Yeah, going back to the Kansas City San Francisco game, though, I will say is Kansas City has become the Harry Houdini of winning games in the NFL. They just slip out of losses like it's nobody's business. I mean, they could easily have three losses this year, and they don't. And that's basically the trademark of a winning team is the fact that you can take snatch a victory out of the jaws of defeat. You know, it's just like any other team without their pedigree and the championship experience that Kansas City has would roll over in these situations. Whereas Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are like, all right, let's dig down a little deeper right now. And also, you're dealing with a San Francisco team that San Francisco is not used to being in this situation. San Francisco, when they're at their strongest, Brock Purdy is playing with a lead. When they fall behind, Purdy has to do too much. And I think he's feeling the pressure right now as well of losing these games and being behind the eight ball a little bit.
Yeah, and Purdy, he's not going to carry the team. And when I look at the Chiefs, they have that championship DNA, and they always find a way to like, wow, terrible. He's got downs and 7 interceptions and 16 to 27 for no TDs, two, and Kelsey's not getting his. It's really Kareem Hunt who's been reborn, who had 22 rushes, TDs, that's carrying this team, and that defense led by Spagnola doing scheming it up. After latest getting heat from the position, Chris Jones, and then Bolton at the linebacker position. Do you think you can keep this up?
I don't see why they can't. I really can't see why they can't. I was just mentioning the fact that they're the Harry Houdini of the NFL. I mean, they slip out of these losses like it's nothing. And there's there a team out there that is dominant enough that you can say, oh yeah, they're better than Kansas City right now. Kansas City has that one. Once again, going to the DNA, they have the one thing where these other teams don't. They expect to win. They find ways to win. Where other teams, turtle up, roll over. These guys push forward and they get the W.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you and I are both from the Philadelphia area, and back in the day, Andy Reid would always find a way to dumb timeouts, clock management. There's just a myriad of things, and it always came in those NFC Championship games at home that they lost. So,
Mhm.
but he's not the same guy. I mean, it's incredible. Now he just is pushing all the right buttons, and he's a guy that he's a Hall of Fame coach, and you got to tip your cap to him. So, yeah, the Chiefs are doing great. We know nobody's ever going to catch the 72 Dolphins and go undefeated, and you're just not going to do that. And then when you look at the Chiefs, we'll kind of look at their schedule board. They're at the Raiders this week. That's a revenge game actually because they lost to the Raiders last year in Vegas, so they're going to probably be for that one. They have Tampa Bay on Monday Night Football after that. Denver at Buffalo. That's Week 11. I'm really looking forward to that game. At Carolina, obviously that's a layup. The Raiders, that should be another layup. The Chargers, are they really ready to step forward? At Cleveland, that's another. Houston, that's going to be a fun one to watch. At Pittsburgh, at Denver. So, they've had a tough schedule early on, and they'll have some games later on that kind of, okay, maybe they can get right, but they have to find some receivers. The Juju Smith Schuster, talk about fantasy football. I played him, and he pulls his hamstring. What? How many would he play? 3 series, and then that was it, and he's out. And I'm like, great, got a big zero from him in my lineup. So, they got to find somebody, whether it's Worthy or one of McCole Hardman, somebody, or make a trade or something to step forward for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, even the kid Gray had some receptions yesterday for him. I mean, it doesn't matter. It was like Rice before he got hurt, Kadarius Toney, Smith Schuster. It's like it doesn't. Mahomes is definitely emulating what Brady did when he didn't have any receivers. It's just like I'll find somebody, somebody will be open, I'll get him the ball, and
And
that's a
yeah,
winning move. I mean, that's what winners do. It's like give me whatever, I'll go out there and I'll win this game.
and he's also running the ball too, which is, he ran and I loved at the goal line when he knocked that safety over and was like, "Yeah, Dad bod wins." You know what I mean? 'Cause the other guy was all jacked, but it was a good win for them, and we'll see. We'll see. I tend to think um, that Week 11 game may be the one where, like, all right, Buffalo, it just may be too tough for them to overcome, but that's a ways away, and we'll see if they're able to make it there. And we know last year, what was I think the Eagles were team them and the Niners, so just are not going to go undefeated. They're also probably not going to go winless like the old team is bad. It's just a lot of parity around the league. All right, so here on Lloyd Vance Inside the Game of Coast Sports Network, I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're working through Week 7 games. We talked about all of them pretty much. All right, I'll go to our biggest thing always. Everybody looks forward to this: game balls and lackey. All right, so game ball. There was a lot of choices, and I could have did the easy one and gave it to Saquon, and that would have rubbed it in Rich Quinones' face, our big Giants fan that I do other stuff with. But I didn't want to do that to him. I picked one of the Detroit Lions. I said Ross St. Brown. He was just incredible in that game against the Minnesota Vikings. 8 targets, 8 receptions, 112 yards, TD. They win 31-29 on the road. They're now 5-1, 1-0 in the division, and the line in the driver's seat. So I gave him my game ball.
That's a good one. My game ball, I got to give a shout out to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson sitting
How
on the
about that?
shelf there for a long time. He came out there, he guided that team. That game was not in doubt, and Russ looked like he didn't have any rust on him. So, I mean, Justin Fields is going to have to take a clipboard for a while if he plays like that.
Yeah, and the thing was, he started the first couple of 3 and outs and a punt, and the fans were getting a little restless. But then you started, as you said, he started heating up. He's a former baseball player. It's like you go 0-2 first to at bats, and then you just keep going. And what he can do that his targets and catches in this game, and that gives them, a different option out there with Russell Wilson.
And the one thing I will have to mention also with this Pittsburgh Steelers team, Tomlin's actually at an advantage right now. I mean, you had Justin Fields with a winning record. The kid's done pretty much what you've asked him to do, and you put him to the side and brought in Russell Wilson. That could have blew up in his face if Russ showed up and didn't do anything. If he was horrible, I mean, you could even destroy Justin Fields' confidence with that. That could have sandbagged your whole season. But he made the right call, so you got to give Mike Tomlin credit for that.
It's something that Pittsburgh, they're a dangerous team. A lot of people are like, the Steelers, but we'll see. They're another one. They need to do some things in the playoffs to kind of say, okay, they're not just a team that Tomlin won with years ago. But we always say, never had a losing season, former Super Bowl winning head coach. And they're going to be competitive. So they have their bye. They have the Giants coming up week 8. So you know how that's probably going to go. And then they have their bye. They're at Washington in a game everybody probably wants to see. Baltimore, at Cleveland, at Cincinnati, Cleveland, at Philly, week 15. I'm going to be interested in that one. At Baltimore, week 16, in Cincinnati. So Steelers got a tough stretch down the season, and they may need to have that veteran presence. So, yeah, right now, Russell Wilson. That was a good pick. Other one, I'll throw out. They only allowed 119 total yards, 8 sacks. Nakobe Dean, their middle linebacker, 11 tackles, 2 sacks, and as they were just dominant. Another guy that I said, okay, game ball potential there.
Yeah, the young Georgia Bulldogs there really picked up for the Eagles, and that's something that they needed because they invested some draft picks in these guys. And it's like, oh, sure, the one time the Eagles finally start drafting SEC players and they don't show up to play, it's like, you got to be kidding me. But these guys are starting to round into form right now, and it's looking good for that defense.
Yeah, the only guy is Jordan Davis. He only played 11 snaps, but seeing, okay, this is guy's a 2-gapper. He's not what they want to do on defense. And they like those speed guys out there. And even Nolan Smith, he got a sack, and you were like, okay, he's even finally making some plays. So Quinyon Mitchell's making a lot of plays for them as a rookie. And then you have Cooper DeJean. He's coming in there. He's playing at nickel corner, and then he had some nice turns where he was just getting up the field for the Eagles. So, we'll see what they have, and all day and hearing Eagles fans are very excited about that win. I said, all right, you beat the Giants. It's good, but, they need to see a little bit more. Lackey, I had to give it. I talk about this. There's so many choices. There's so many bad teams out there and their players. But I had to give it to the Raiders quarterback Gardner Minshew. I mean, 15 to 30, 44%, 154 passing, no TDs, 3 interceptions in this game. In a game they had a chance in. They lose to the Rams by 5.15. He was terrible, so I had to give it to them. And obviously, Antonio Pierce. I don't think he's one of these coaches. I just don't think he's going to make it through the season. He was an interim coach, and I don't see it happening for him. He's in the middle of a 3-game losing streak, and his team, as we said, is just kind of awful. The other one and you can piggyback on any of this, is the New York Giants. Take your pick. Daniel Jones gets benched at the end of the game. 14 to 21, 99 yards. And then their offensive line without Thomas, which is terrible. 8 sacks they allowed.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do with that team. They're just set up for failure at this point. And they might get some fluke win here or there. They're not good, and they're nowhere close to being good. And I can't imagine you're a New York fan and you have two teams. You hardly see anyone root for the Giants and the Jets. I mean, you pick your side of the street and you stay on it. But you got two teams in that city and they both stink right now. It's like you better be glad the Yankees are still there because the Mets took you as far as they could. So I mean, there's nothing to be happy about if you're a New York football fan. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network, winding down. Before we switch over to next week's games, want to get your take, Kevin, on coaches on a hot seat. So I just wrote out a couple of them and kind of comment on. Yeah, the Raiders, and 2-5, terrible roster. They trade Devontae Adams. Mason Crosby is really their only guy. Not Mason, that's the kicker. Max Crosby. And who's the quarterback? I mean, so he's a coach on.
And jumping in real quick as we work on our technical difficulties still. I have a vote for my lackey of the week. My lackey of the week is selfishness at its finest. Is CJ Stroud from the Houston Texans for my fantasy football team. How do you play and hang that many points? CJ Stroud scored 5 points. CJ Stroud scoring 5 points buries my fantasy football team. Everyone else goes off. I got Tank Bigsby giving me 22 points. But no, I got CJ Stroud hanging me 5. So now I got to hope that Marvin Harrison Jr. gets less than 9 points tonight, and I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so then we're wrapping up. We have about 10 minutes left. We'll go through the games coming up in week 8. Thursday night, you have the Minnesota Vikings are coming off that loss to the Lions. They're at the Rams. I just think this kind of a bounce back game. Darnold going back to LA, where it all started for him at USC. And Jefferson is just, they have so many playmakers in terms of the Vikings offense. I don't think the Rams have enough firepower. I think the Vikings win.
Agreed. I think the Rams are a shell of what they were without Nakua and Cup both there. They just can't generate enough offense with Williams.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I'm trying to. A lot of these games are like, all right, there's going to be a blowout. You know, Baltimore knows going to beat Cleveland. We know Detroit's going to kill Tennessee. Indianapolis and Houston. I think that Houston just has way too many weapons, and they're going to get back on track this week. C.J. Stroud playing at a high level. He had a bad game against Green Bay, so I think he's going to be a bounce back here. Joe Mixon running the football well, and uh, Indy's offensive line's not that good, so I think Houston wins this one.
Oh, agreed entirely. I don't think, and we just spoke about it earlier. It's like I don't think with Richardson the Colts are a better team. With Flacco, they have a better chance of winning right now. But they want to ride it out with Richardson, see what he can do, let him go through his growing pains. And this is Houston's division definitely to take.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. The Jets and New England. I think they win that one. Go on, and hopefully everybody will be healthy. Chicago's at Washington. You have Gene Daniels with who's playing well. They had another blowout. They're leading the NFL.
And the one thing I will say also with Jaden Daniels rather, and Caleb Williams, it's a nice matchup for the NFL to throw those two big rookie quarterbacks out there. That's good ratings right there, and it's almost like the passing of the new guard starting to come on because you got the old guard like Aaron Rodgers. People start leaving, even though Russell Wilson came back and got a W this past week. You want to see the young quarterbacks. You want to see the next crop come up and who's going to take the mantle for this league.
Yeah. Buffalo at Seattle. Seattle's such a tough place to play. They are 4-3. Juno Smith's playing a lot better. But Josh Allen playing an MVP, not turning the football over. They have just that stepped in, a young running back, Kentucky, and then Cook's running the ball well. They're getting Cooper acclimated with this team and two of the best tight ends. So I think Buffalo wins this one and keeps it.
Almost definitely. I don't see Buffalo losing this game at all. It's one of those, they're playing at the right time, the Dolphins. I mean, the fact is, it's like they're not going to be able to score any points right now until you can get Tua going in healthy.
Yeah, and in this next game, we've kind of we kind of previewed it a little bit. The Philadelphia Eagles, they seem to get gotten right. They're 4-2, huge road test going to Cincinnati, who's 3-4. The Cincinnati's won three straight games. Um, I I just think Joe Burrow's too good. As long as they block for him up front, the Eagles are still inconsistent in my opinion. I think Green Bay. I'm sorry. I think the Bengals.
Yeah, I have to go forward on that as well. I believe also, I think Cincinnati has too much for Philadelphia right now. I think Philadelphia got fat off of a couple two bad teams right now. They got their wins against the Browns, they got their wins against the Giants, and combined, I mean, those are probably the bottom 20% of the league right there. Those two teams involved combined. So that being said, Cincinnati is a notorious slow starter. They don't really start playing well until they get to October. And also, there's a few other things. I think also one of the things that works for Cincinnati is the Cincinnati Bengals have not lost to the Eagles since the year 2000. Since 2000, the Eagles have not beaten the Cincinnati Bengals, and that includes in that mix somewhere the Donovan McNabb. I didn't know there was overtime game. So once again, if Philadelphia does lose this game to Cincinnati, you're going to have all the Sirianni watch people out again. You're going to see him sit there. Sirianni will bring his kids out to the press conference
All
again.
right, we must be having some.
Questions.
Yeah, there may. Yeah, there may be. We may be having some weather down there in Tampa. I'm not sure. Uh, Connection's been crazy tonight. Carolina, who Carolina? I, Carolina is going to play over in England in a couple. I mean, over in Germany in a couple weeks. It's going to be, I think, the Giants versus Carolina in Germany. So we're going to find out who's the worst team in the NFL. So Carolina, I think Denver thumps them. I think Kansas City obviously keeps it rolling against the Raiders. This one's going to be interesting. Sunday night football next week, though. Dallas coming off a bye. They're 3-3. Yeah, they're playing San Francisco, a team that's beaten them pretty much a lot in the playoffs and they've had problems with. Um, but the Niners are so beat up. I think Dallas may win this one.
I think Dallas needs to win that game. If Dallas doesn't win that game right there, you're looking at another coaching carousel that might start to begin.
Yeah, and it's crazy because Dallas, Mike McCarthy, another one of these coaches, we need to say he's on a hot seat. Uh, what do you think of Jerry Jones and all that? All that, he's fighting with the radio hosts of his own show, and and all that. He needs to. This team is not going to move forward. Their national laughing stock after that 47 and whatever 9 loss at home, and I just think this team's not going to move forward till he steps away as general manager. Let somebody run football operations. It's just crazy that he's still the GM of the Dallas Cowboys.
Let that man live to be 120 years old. I want him to run that team as long as humanly possible. Anybody who is a fan of a team in the NFC East wants Jerry Jones to be in control permanently.
Yeah, it's crazy because he gave Dak that big contract, and something's really. They're 3-3, but it's by Scotch tape and bubble gum. I just when you look at Dallas so at the Falcons, Philadelphia in Week 10. I can't. The Giants, who are Cincinnati at Carolina, Tampa Bay at Philly, Washington. So I see a lot of games where Dallas the right people in, and it shows you from drafts, and that points to personnel. And as I said, Jerry Jones, yeah, you want him as GM. A lot of people. Last game we'll preview here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, Week 8. The Giants 2-5. They're going to Pittsburgh. You saw the Eagles get 8 against them, and the Steelers have a way better pass rush. Watt may set the NFL single game record in sacks, which is I think like 8 or 9 by Derek Brooks. Uh, what is it, Derek Brooks? Am I saying his name
Eric
right?
Thomas.
Derek Thomas, yes.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on this game?
Not really. I mean, like this is kind of the, like in a movie, there's like build up and epic up highs and lows. This is a low week right here. There's a lot of games on the slate that you're kind of like, eh. But it's following for the next week where you're going to have bump, bump, bump. It's part of the storytelling of the season, and we just kind of have to get through this and hopefully have enough interesting games. Something you actually want to talk about instead of back-to-back thumpings left and right.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the key thing is teams that after week 7 are over 500 or better have an 84% chance of making the playoffs. So, last year was 17 teams that were 500 or better after week 7, and 12 of them made the playoffs. So, you just want to stack W's at this time of the year, and that's what the Chiefs are doing, and some of these other teams. It may not be pretty, but you know what? They win the game and they move on. So, we'll see. Another great week here on Lloyd Mancer's Inside of Football on 1029, the Coastal Sports Network. We appreciate everybody joining us. Appreciate back for another week. And Angel survived the hurricane down there in Tampa, doing a great job behind the glass. So, thanks for joining, and we will talk to you next week.